Yamuna Pushta in Delhi was one of the oldest and largest slums in India. In reality, a chain of 22 small slums located on a 3-kilometer stretch along the Yamuna River. This settlement was home to 40,000 families. It housed more than 150,000 people and was in existence for decades. Yamuna Pushta was virtually a township where a world within a world existed. In the guise of resettlement, encroachment, pollution and beautification of the city, in early 2004, in a matter of weeks, 40,000 homes were demolished without any rehabilitation plan. 120,000 people were left to the mercy of the cruel streets. But the main issue is not just about demolitions. The point of concern is, why do we allow a situation to arise where mass-scale and ruthless demolitions have to be resorted to? A number of questions were left unanswered.
A slum could be defined as a place, usually within an urban settlement, populated by poorer people and invariably migrants into the urban situation because of helplessness back home and the incapacity to afford a better place of living within the urban milieu.
Why do we force those who are instrumental in building the very foundations of every city and who work and toil for our comfort and pleasure? Why do we compel them to live in the most abysmal conditions and then, when it takes our fancy, even demolish their humble homes and their very future? Research indicates that in another 40 years, every third person living on planet Earth will be a slum dweller. Why are we forcing families to live in slums?
No one is enforcing law. Okay. So people can come and squat anywhere they like. And then there is slum politics, Okay. People like to create vote banks.
Well, because we neglected them. We didn't have a plan for them. We let them be. I think it was callous governance.
The problem is that the planning has, by and large, tended to really seriously underestimate the number of poor people who come to this city to live and work. Okay. And as a result, the availability of legal housing, of places where poor people can come and settle down and either buy a plot of land or rent a place, is much lower than what the demand is. So it basically forces people to go down and to come to the city and to settle in a slum.
You are not addressing the central issue of the formation of the slum, which is poverty and access to work.
The other is the conscious policies of the government, where, big companies are taking over land, whether it's agricultural land or just forest land. Okay. And it's happening in Odisha, it's happening in Jharkhand, it's happening in Bundelkhand. So they are stuck. So those are the people who are bound to migrate. Artisans and weavers.
Hiralal belonged to the famous Rana Pratap clan. He lived with his wife and 10 children. And his forefathers were dacoits and later on became street entertainers.
तो उस टाइम भी हम जो है जंगलाती खाना खाना, जंगलाती रहना, घास की रोटी खाई है, तो फिर भी हमको शिक्षा नहीं मिली. अब जो है वहाँ से निकल के हम लोग जो है दिल्ली शहर के अंदर आए, तो कुछ शिक्षा प्रवृत्त बच्चों के लिए कर रहा है. तो अब जो सरकार है वापस हमें उसी जंगलात के नीति से भेज रहे हैं, तो हम फिर वही अपने बच्चे भी विचलित नहीं होंगे, पढ़े लिखे भी नहीं होंगे.
मील न होती, हमारे से मजदूर काम न करते तो आज ये कपड़े कहाँ से पहनते. आज के घर में हमारी माँ बहनें झाड़ू नहीं लगाती, बर्तन नहीं मांजती, कपड़े नहीं धोते, धोबी ना होते, तो आज ये कपड़े साफ पहन सकते थे?
There are 100,000 people in the city, work in the city, collect the daily waste, which the municipality is unable to do, and they recycle almost 10 to 15% of the other waste, paper, metal, even toxic waste, which the city doesn't have the wherewithal to do anything with. So I think they are a fantastic service provider to the city, but they're considered illegal. They're living in shanty towns as such as the ones you see across the city there.
Delhi as a city totally depends on working class people to be there. Any house in a well-to-do colony has at least 4 or 5 people who come in to clean, look after children, wash the car, cook, etc., etc. So if you look at the domestic requirement of labor, and along with that you look at all the petty services, courier services, people running rickshaws, etc. We're talking about a very, very large service population that this city absolutely depends on. And if this population were not to exist, Delhi as a city would stop existing.
In a rational planning of town, you need every section of the people. True. If you want a city to run smoothly, then provision for their stay has to be made in the plan. Today, livelihood and residence are connected. Earlier, wherever a person resided had his livelihood. In the village you had the farm or worked on it. It's not so. Now wherever your livelihood takes you, you reside.
That a person with no transportation, no means of livelihood, would like to work at a place which is next to him.
महामंत्री मुख्यमंत्री ने कहा था ये कि गरीबी हटाओ, तो गरीबी के साथ में गरीबों को हटाने की कोशिश कर लिया, गरीबों को मारने के लिए.
Apart from the wretched stance on rural development or the lack of it, the growth and prevalence of slums in most developing countries is due to the non-implementation of the master plan or the town housing plan.
The first master plan actually was a very progressive plan. It recognized environmental areas, it recognized the need to accommodate the poor in the city, it recognized the importance of providing flatted factories and small industries and so on. The problem has been that a lot of the things that's been proposed in the plan has never been implemented.
Previous master plans have not been complied with. They've been consistently violated by the very people who are actually supposed to be implementing the plan.
But there are 2 main problems. One, that the master plan has systematically underestimated the number of poor people who need housing in the city. In fact, it's done that to the extent that even the census figures for what Delhi's projected population is going to be in the future have not been respected.
Because right now they are seeing the master plan as a document which deals with land management. And it barely deals with the issues of poverty, and it barely deals with issues of social amenities. It does make provision for social amenities, but in the current scenario it seems to be largely driven by the market, which is the money market.
There's a serious gap between the numbers that are supposed to be built on paper for economically weaker sections and the numbers that are actually built. So we find that DDA, for instance, has built 300% more housing, that is 3 times more housing for higher income groups than what it was required to by the master plan.
So there is need for change, and there is a provision within the master plan. There's a legal provision, a legal route through which they can change the provision for land uses in the plan. And this has happened almost 400 times in the last year. And whenever the government wants to promote a scheme or to accommodate a scheme, quote unquote accommodate a scheme, then they change the land use.
The master plan is an indicative document. It has no legal sanction. So if you look at Delhi's growth, when the Asian Games happened in Delhi in 1982, the biggest violations of the master plan were done right then by the DDA, which is the authority that is vested with the power to actually responsibility of implementing the master plan.
So what prompted the judiciary and the authorities to demolish 40,000 homes and displace 150,000 people without even bothering to work out a rehabilitation plan? What compelled the beacon of hope and justice to pass an order that made thousands of families homeless and threw 20% of those whose homes had been demolished onto a barren piece of land? Land far away from civilization, and any hope of earning a livelihood.
The first ground was that this was an illegal colony which had come up on government land. This land was not owned by these people. Secondly, I think the perception was that this is causing a lot of nuisance and pollution in the river.
When Yamuna flows through Delhi, what contributes to its major pollutants?
So Yamuna is a 1200 kilometer river, and Delhi is about only 22 kilometers flows through. But 80% of the pollution, whole river, is contributed when it flows through Delhi. There are two classes of pollutants. One is sewage, household sewage. Second is industrial sewage, which is mixed with the household sewage.
See, we're not even 100 meters from where Yamuna has entered Delhi, and the situation is extremely worse over here. Central Pollution Control Board says that the water quality is E-class, which means leave alone human beings. It's not even fit for animals to bathe in.
What is this here?
This is Najafgarh drain. Delhi's Yamuna, when it starts at Wazirabad, it's literally stopped at Wazirabad, and what actually flows into Yamuna are these 18 similar drains. So the Najafgarh drain actually pumps somewhere around 1300 million liters of wastewater every day. The same drain at one point in time was actually a river, which none of us know. There was something called Sahibi River, and now what we see made out of a Sahibi River is just a black drain. You have acid flowing in this, you have mixed metals flowing in this. This is agricultural waste, industrial waste. The muck that is coming from our flush, so everything is actually here in this particular drain, and all these 18 drains compose Yamuna in Delhi.
If you see, there have been studies done on how much pollution the slum dwellers caused. It was less than 1% of the total pollution in the river. And slum dwellers basically don't have water to drink. So people who don't have water to drink can't create sewage. Sewage comes from people who consume water, and most of the water is consumed in the city, in the richer parts of the city itself. So this is just, to me it seems like it's a lame reason.
Right now, for example, we have come on a day which is Amavasya, and there are these homeless people who bathe in the river. You'll find thousands and thousands of people who bathe in the river. Lots and lots of people who drink the same black water, Sada Kala Pani that we call. Of course, people bathing in out of their religious faith. Big people with flashy cars stop their car there on the bridge and dump their garbage in the river.
So from the bridge, it's dumped here and they clean it?
They clean it because it's a livelihood for them. So there's a personal connection, there's an economic connection that they make with the river. And they're the ones who are actually in true sense the river keepers, and not those people who are educated and are in.
सारा पॉलिटिक्स की वजह से, अगर पॉलिटिक्स नहीं होता तो जब इलेक्शन के बाद भी हो सकता था, क्योंकि 10 साल से जमुना गंदी हो रही है, तो आज 1-2 महीने में क्या प्रॉब्लम थी इनको।
The other side of it is that it's an illegal settlement, because that is not land that they're supposed to be on, they're squatters. So in that sense, legally they have no right to be there. The third thing is that is an area that is the floodplain of the Yamuna, and for ecological reasons there should be no buildings on that floodplain. which means that not only should the Yamuna Pushta people not be there for their own safety, because this is an area that gets flooded, but no building of any sort, including the Akshardham temple, the 4 power plants that are on the Yamuna, the Delhi government secretariat, none of these should be there at all. So there are good reasons for moving buildings away from the Yamuna Pushta, which means not only slum dwellers, but everybody else who is there on the floodplain.
And I think the president inaugurated.
President, Prime Minister both had gone. Yeah. So how do we look at the legality and illegality of these things? Metro station is coming near there. Commonwealth Games village is coming near there. So when it comes to using the same land, it's okay. When it comes to the poor, well, they don't have an entitlement. Sainik Farm can go on, surviving for times immemorial. Nobody is going to destroy Sainik Farm.
Akshardham, it is an organized construction. It is not a disorganized construction. And it was done with a proper planning, with proper approval of the DDA. It was sanctioned and the Supreme Court upheld when somebody went and did petition against it. It was upheld.
The DDA has changed the land use of the riverbed. About 42 hectares of land on the riverbed, where Akshardham and the Commonwealth Games and all are going to come, into public and semi-public use.
Akshardham is on land which has been allotted to this Akshardham society. Of course, in what manner and what circumstances it was allotted is another story, because quite clearly all environmental norms were thrown to the winds.
Now, if the riverbed, certain portion of the riverbed has been earmarked for channelization, you reclaim the land as you reclaim the sea, and then you put up an organized settlement with proper sanitation, proper facilities and so on, proper games. So this is in the overall public interest.
If these facilities, because they are seen to be part of the corporate structure of the city, can enjoy the privilege of having water supply, electricity and a sewage treatment system, why can't it be provided also to other citizens, the citizens who are living in the Yamuna Pushta area?
A citizen here in India, born here in India.
As many as 20, by conservative estimate, could be evicted, a lakh displaced. And newspapers like Times of India, Hindustan Times carrying no more than a paragraph perhaps. So in some ways they reflect not just their own corporate interests, but also the mindset of a middle class population in Delhi.
The whole thing of, I would say, an anti-poor attitude is very strong in the media also.
Because media is based on sponsorship. Media is based on commercial money, commercial for running. So why would they go where there is no purchasing power? So it's all commerce. Media is also commerce. 5 minutes here and a 6 minute there, I think doesn't make it pro-sensitive to poor.
Trying to report is one thing, but trying to understand the complexity of trying to represent voices that are very soft, cannot be heard, that are disempowered. I mean, that would really be the ideal kind of media, of which perhaps there are 1 or 2 newspapers or magazines or such, but predominantly, no, I don't think so.
Forced evictions is a violation of the protection rights of every child. Way in which it stares right in the face is a loss of a home. It's the loss of a protective environment, because a home represents security, protection to every child. It also establishes a sense of stability in a child's life, all of which is lost the moment a home is taken away from a child.
For a child, even if you break a little khilona of theirs or tumble out a sand structure or something, it's enough of a shock, right? But to have adults whom they may have thus far experienced as caregivers, as parents, as people in the community, as dada, dadi, masi, chacha, chachi, suddenly have adults who come and just demolish. So I think it's just one of utter shock.
Those who were forced to shift to Bhavana had to spend more than a week on the streets. The reason was simple. Those in charge of allotting the families their plots of land didn't bother showing up. The land allotted to each family was on a 5-year lease. Thus, there was no guarantee of permanent residentship. After 5 years, they could be kicked out of Bhavana too.
गरीब बच्चा को भेज दिए, भूखे नंगा पड़ा हुआ है, इतना बारिश है, इतने दिन पानी में बैठा हुआ, उस टाइम कोई खाने तक भी पूछेगा नहीं है यहाँ पे कोई, कुछ भी नहीं है यहाँ पे, ना खाने का रोटी है, ना कोई चूल्हा चक्की बना भी सकते, भूखा पड़ा है, उस टाइम कोई नहीं आते हैं हमारे देखने के लिए, आते नहीं आते, सभी मजाक उड़ाते, कि गरीबों का फायदा उठाते बाहर वाले लोग।
छत हुआ था, पक्का का घर था, अब क्या बोले हैं, अब हुआ उजाड़ दिए हैं, अब जल रहे मर रहे हैं धूप में बच्चे लोग के लेके, जब भूखे प्यासे बैठे हुए हैं तो सरकार रोटी भेजेंगे।
Since they're poor, they have got no stake in the city. Since they're poor, and the homeless people, would not be able to wash themselves for days at length, so we have to beautify the city, which means that you have to throw them out of everybody's view. Because the city has to be beautiful. Delhi has to be Shanghai. Delhi has to be Singapore. Yeah. It's not a world-class city. So hence, these people, the poor, the urban poor, who we say are homeless, actually are living on the fringes of the city. And hence, since they have no voice, no politician talk about it, they can be dumped anywhere.
तो उखाड़ के भेज दिए, ये धूप में न कोई साधन है, न कोई चीज है, न खाने कमाने का जगह, न कुछ नहीं है, नाम का शौचालय, बाकी ज्यादा पे जाते हैं लैट्रिन, ज्यादा पे 1 रुपया मांगते हैं, गरीब आदमी कहाँ से देंगे शौचालय का पैसा?
घर में 8 बच्चे हैं,
वो 8 रुपए लेंगे तो खाएंगे क्या?
और पानी का ये है कि सुबह 2 घंटे मिलते हैं, 2 घंटे दोपहर में और 2 घंटे शाम को है, और इस बीच में आप जो भर लिए नहीं तो फिर बैठो। उसका अगर शौचालय से पीने के लिए भी 1 बोतल लेने जाते हैं तो 1 रुपया दो जी, 1 गैलन पानी लेना है तो 1 रुपया दो, 1 गैलन, 1 जोड़े कपड़ा धुलाई करना है तो 1 रुपया दो, ये शौचालय वाले का नियम है। कहते हैं नहीं दोगे तो नहीं, बच्चे के लिए 1 रुपये चाहिए, हर चीज के ऊपर कर लगा दिया गया है। ये बताओ जब हम यहाँ से मजदूरी नहीं कर सकते तो इनको देंगे कहाँ से?
और यहाँ उनके पास बिल्कुल नील है वो लोग, कुछ लोग ऐसे हैं जिनके पास रोटी तक की सुविधा नहीं है इधर, 2.5 घंटे, जो लोग कर्जा लेके ही 7,000 रुपए उन्होंने गवर्नमेंट को दिए हैं और यहाँ उनके पास कोई पैसा, किसी चीज की कोई सुविधा नहीं।
The Yamuna Pushta families lost all that they possessed and had to even borrow money, $7,000 in all, to lease the 12 by 12 plot of land.
आज ये सूखी रोटी खा रहा है, ये जगमोहन की मेहरबानी है। 30 साल पहले जब मैं आया था यहाँ यमुना पुस्ता के अंदर, तो सिर्फ मेरे पास सिर्फ टिकट का पैसा था और खाने का पैसा था। जब मैंने धीरे धीरे करके बनाया कुछ, और बनाने के बाद झुग्गी बनाई, मेहनत किया, काम लगाया, लाइसेंस बनाया, नौकरी लगाई, नौकरी लगाने के बाद में जब मैंने पढ़ा, थोड़ा पढ़ने के बाद सब कुछ मेरा हो गया सेटलमेंट, तब मेरे पास थोड़ा बहुत पैसा आया, घर वर दिया, चटाई का घर बनाया, उसके बाद जितना कमाया था वो टूटने में लग गया, इधर खाने में लग गया, जहाँ 30 साल पीछे थे फिर उसी तरह फिर हो गए।
पक्के मकान थे हमारे, सारे तोड़ के यहाँ पर भेज दिया। अब यहाँ देख लो सर सामान, बच्चे हमारे भूखे मर रहे हैं, ना यहाँ पानी है, बच्चे मच्छर इतने काट रहे हैं कि मलेरिया हो जाएगा। रात भर हमारे बच्चे सोते नहीं है, यहाँ पर पानी भी नहीं है, न बिजली है, न सोने का ढंग है, न झुग्गी और झोपड़ी, सब कुछ
जनरेटर की रखी और अच्छा कुछ बिल्डिंग नहीं है। एक बोर्ड लगा हुआ है कि ये प्राइमरी स्कूल है,
तो बनते 2-3 साल हो जाएगा।
नहीं बोर्ड है, बोर्ड से तसल्ली कर रहे हैं कि प्राइमरी स्कूल है और ये सेकेंडरी स्कूल है, डिस्पेंसरी है।
अच्छा।
All those who are not seen to be contributing to the corporate economic activity of the city are people who are liabilities to the city.
Okay.
So, and they would like to see these people removed from central areas of the city and then thrown to periphery or hidden in places which are not visible to the corporate eye.
कि अगर सरकार इसको चाहे तो सारे बच्चे को अनाथ आश्रम में भर्ती कर दिया जाए।
The whole premise that urbanization, development, growth of cities can take place only when some people are marginalized is a fallacious premise.
Okay.
It's based on principles of inequity rather than principles of equity and justice. And that is where the demolitions seem okay. It's okay for some people. At the cost of some people, we will have a beautiful city.
Well, I think the gravest danger is that we are creating cities and a society where there is actually what we are seeing is a form of sort of urban and rural apartheid, where we are seeing a very clear distinction between where the rich will live and where the poor will live. And usually the rich are living in, more and more you see gated communities that are cut off from the rest of the society. You're seeing areas where you have full services, water, sanitation, everything, and then you're seeing areas where you don't have.
With the way the construction is going into, I don't know whether they again would get pushed out. Because there is nothing to be built within the city. It's the outskirts which are going to provide land for the growth and I doubt whether these ghettos will, if we call them ghettos, even they last long.
कोई पार्टी कोई मदद नहीं कर रही है। मैंने झुग्गी जो है खुद अपने आप बनाई है, मेरे भाई ने मिलकर बनाई है, दोनों भाई ने मिलकर, किसी ने किसी प्रकार की मदद नहीं करी है। मैं वोट किसी को नहीं दूंगा।
The alternative is to consider the slum dweller as a human being and a legitimate citizen of the city. They don't seem to be at present enjoying the status of a legitimate citizen. I am a migrant to the city, but I seem to be a legitimate citizen.
बहुत फ्लैट जगह नहीं मिली है, प्राइवेट बस वहाँ बंद कर दी गई है और गवर्नमेंट बस जो चल रही है उन्हें भी भवाना चौक पे से खाली करवा दिया जा रहा है। किसी पब्लिक को आने नहीं दिया जा रहा वहाँ। मैं खुद बड़ी मुसीबत से यहाँ आया हूँ, बहुत परेशानी करके अपनी वोट डालने के लिए।
चल रही है, सबको रोक लगाया जा रहा, पुलिस वाली रोक रही थी, सवारी उतार रहे हैं वहीं पे, गाड़ी को एक भी नहीं आने दे रहा, पब्लिक वहाँ औरतें बच्चे परेशान हाल में हो रहे हैं वहाँ।
गरीब आदमी का छोटे बच्चों का क्या हाल कर दिया।
People don't squat on public land because they want to. They do it because they have no other choice. By and large, these are very poor, vulnerable people. They're not land grabbers. And if Delhi had a provision of affordable housing, nobody wants to live under threat of being demolished and their homes and families scattered at all.
Unless we hold state accountable, the state will get away with what it's doing. And we have to train people to hold state accountable, to ask questions. हम तुमको वोट दिया था, लेकिन now you have to come back and perform.
किसी ने टीवी में दिखाया झुग्गियों में, सीरियल वाला है नहीं, हमारे बच्चे मर गए।
You work on social conflict, political conflict with children, gradually let them evolve on their own.
And the solution to the housing crisis in Delhi it has to be a city-wide solution. So we have to call for upgradation where it's possible. We have to say, okay, I would agree there are places where people would have to be moved because they're living in dangerous conditions or they're living in very high-density areas.
So it has to be a people-centered policy for relocation, and it should not be just driven by calculations for land.
Supreme Court has declared housing to be a fundamental right, and therefore in order to implement that fundamental right on behalf of those people who do not have any houses of their own and are being forced to live in the jhoppi colonies, certainly one can go to court, and the court should order the government to develop those lands which have already been earmarked for the weaker sections and provide housing.
First of all, prevent bringing up a slum. If it happens, then they are human beings. There are children, there are men, there are women, there are lives involved, there are livelihoods involved. Therefore, it's so critical that we have a proper rehab plan where again they stay put there and not just thrown on under the sky, but they also have work, they have education, they have, which comes later, unregrettable, which comes over a period, which should come actually as a package. Now that we learned a lesson that relocation is very, very painful. Very painful, a pain that individuals affected will never forget all their lives. And social costs will be very, very high.
Spare a thought for the poor, who have been forced to come to the city in search of survival. They spend their entire life serving and making our world so much better. They ask not much, but a little space to call home and live life with dignity and stability, and not be forever judged as outcast and the damned. No mother wants to bring a child up in a slum. Families live in slums not out of choice, but because it is a matter of survival. And for God's sake, demolishing homes of the poor is not the solution.